Okay, so my apologies for not being able to be there in person, but I'm glad that Hoon said that we could do things virtually. So let me give you a little bit of insight into where this is going. So a couple months ago, we published this paper, which is a pretty in-depth review of all of the different perspectives on privacy with respect to genetics and genomic data specifically. Um, I like to say it's somewhat comprehensive in that if you look at our figure one, it covers a lot of different ground. But the real thing to take away from this is that we did an analysis on three different areas. One is privacy requirements with respect to the healthcare setting. The second area was privacy requirements with respect to the research setting. And the third is with respect to the direct-to-consumer genomics environment, which has very different set of laws and responsibilities. One of the things that we didn't do is that we didn't spend too much time talking about the forensic environment. We talk about it, but in the same vein as what Yaniv was talking about earlier today, there are a lot of things that law enforcement can do with data that other people cannot do with data. So for what I'm about to recount for you, I would say hold this off to the side for the moment. One of the things that I think people are saying over and over again, and I think we can repeat it one more time, is that there are a lot of different ways in which you can exploit genomic data. And a lot of this, it all goes back to work that was done late 90s, early 2000s. We were doing some of this work. Russ Altman's team was doing some of this work. And one of the first things that, caused this problem is just the high dimensionality of the data. I think Gamze was really highlighting this well. Because it doesn't take that many pieces of information to make you unique in a crowd. And so that's exactly what Genlin had shown. It really only took like around 50 to 60 SNPs in order to make somebody unique. Now let's look a little bit at the evolution here. So then what we saw, and I think that this was also what was starting to be highlighted, was that there were ways that you could exploit summary statistics about just the rate at which variation was occurring, and what we've seen more recently is that you don't even need to know the rate at which variation. You just need to know there is variation, right? But this was a major fiasco in the late 2010, around 2008, 2010, when dbGaP was putting all this information out into the public domain. And you had case control studies that had information out in front of in the public, and people were able to do comparisons against environments like 1,000 genomes, such that when somebody came forward with a known genomic sequence, you could do a direct comparison and say, are you more likely to be in this group or that group? And that's where the likelihood ratio tests came from. You fast forward a little bit, and then there were these studies that Yaniv made famous by saying, could you infer an individual's surname and therefore use that in combination with other demographics about somebody to identify them? This was somewhat of a watershed moment. And then a couple years later, it was shown by Srigapuri and Bustamante that beacon environments that the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health had made public and tried to make more widely available. They were subject to similar types of attacks. And then you have the work that Lippert and Craig Ventnor had really pushed forward in proceedings of national academies, 2017, that said you could use traits or you could infer traits about individuals, and you could possibly reproduce an individual's face based on the genomic and some other information that you see about them if you had the right training information. And then most recently, I would say that there was work that showed that you could build up familial relationships, and that law enforcement could walk into environments like GEDmatch and say, okay, well, thanks for personally contributing all of your genomic information, but now we've got cold case data, and we're going to go look for family members and then reconstruct the family tree and go ask everybody in that family tree, give us a copy of your DNA or give us a swab, and we're going to determine whether or not you were a killer in the 1970s, like in the situation with respect to the Golden State Killer. And then Yaniv's study showed that there are a lot of people in the United States that are probably at risk for having relatives within these types of databases. So this is where it's a very scary situation, and then I like to say that this notion of possibility is not necessarily the same thing as being able to compromise a system all over the place. And so I'll highlight a few papers that we recently published in Science Advances a couple months ago. One in which we were revisiting the notion of, could you reconstruct an individual's face based on genomic information and traits? And then I'll talk a little bit about, could you really do what Yaniv did with trying to track down individuals by inferring their surname and then trying to re-identify them using publicly available data sets. So revisiting this study that Lippert had published, I'm not the first one to say that it might not have been as possible as suggested. This panning of the paper, this was actually done by Yaniv. And so we got really interested in this, and so we went back and we said, so let's say, let's pull data on a couple people. We took about 100 individuals who had their genomes that they had uploaded up to OpenSNP, and then we filtered these individuals for 4 types of phenotypes or traits: their eye color, their hair color, sex, and skin. We wanted to make sure that was there. And then we pulled some additional images of these individuals, if it was available on OpenSNP or through a Google reverse search. And then we took VGG face, which is a convolutional neural network that's very well heavily used with respect to face recognition. And we used this for transfer learning on top of the Celeb data sets, about 200,000 images, so that we could get a good representation of faces. And then we had Amazon Mechanical Turkers give us labels for the traits that we were interested in. And we built up the correlations between the genomic variants, which was basically a set of SNPs and these traits. And then we went back and said, so what's the chance that we're actually going to be able to identify someone if we don't have super high quality resolution images and we use just the type of we come across on the internet? And what you're looking at here is it's hard. It's really hard. As you ramp up the number of people in your gallery, by the time you get to about 50 individuals, the chance that you would be correct on the first guess is really small, right? It's less than 2% at this point. If you try to give a little bit more leeway and you say what happens within the first 5 ranks, it gets a little better. It still doesn't get that good. And this is a relatively small population size. We're not talking about populations on the order of 1 million or even a billion, which is what places like Clearview have now constructed. We're talking about if you were able to narrow down the initial set of individuals that you're interested in surveying to 50. So this really calls into question about like how possible is it to do this type of an attack? So that was there's a lot more that we talked about in the paper, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of intuition into the things that we're thinking about. And so the next week we went back and we revisited Yaniv's attack, which is what's referred to as a multi-stage attack, where in stage 1 you infer the individual's surname, in stage 2 you take the other demographics that individuals made available within a record, and then combine that with the surname and then try and attack for re-identification. Now, interestingly, when they had initially published this paper, NHGRI had said, yeah, we're not that worried about this, and we're not going to change our practices as an artifact. And there were a lot of people that really questioned this. And so we were curious about whether or not this was a good decision. And so this is what we investigate in this other paper, which we really start to look at this from the perspective of an economics problem. So this looks really complex, but let me walk you through the principle. What we're really looking at is risk with respect to the potential for identification. And we kind of model this in 2 parts, in that we're interested in what's the chance that somebody's going to commit the attack, and then what's the chance that they're going to be successful given that they've committed the attack. And what a lot of people have talked about today is the second component of the problem, which says how unique is somebody, what's the chance that you can get access to this information in multiple resources. But what we're not really talking about are all the potential deterrents that get set in place, like how hard this is actually to do, like what's the amount of computation that you need to pay for, and what's the likelihood that you're going to do this knowing that somebody's watching you. And so we've heard a lot about like some of these methods we've heard a little bit about like some of the crypto technologies, but really all I'm saying is that these are protection strategies that you can invoke to try to prevent misuse. But in reality, what we're talking about is a situation in which there's at least somebody who has their data and they're trying to share it with somebody who may or may not be trusted. And so what we do is we model what these incentive structures are and then formally represent the strategies, and then we represent the procedures that they have to go through in order to be successful. And economically, this is really the basis of a two-party Stackelberg game, where what you have is somebody who's trying to share data. They know what utility they're going to get out of it. It could be like the correctness of the function that we saw in the previous presentation. And they could look at all the different ways in which they might be able to protect the data. And I could have thrown SMC in here as an example as well. But they're really quite varied when you think about what people do, and they're all over the place. They're from like changing the data to charging for access or trying to apply data use agreements. But what we don't know is the chance that the system is going to be exploited. So the risk is unknown. So what you can do is simulate all the different ways in which somebody might try to penetrate the system. And they are going to get some amount of utility off of doing this for themselves. That's their benefit. And then you can say, so if they maximize their utility, then there's going to induce a certain level of risk. And you can take that risk level and you can push that back into the strategy that you were considering. And you run this across all of your strategies. And then you will maximize the one for you as the defender when you're going to share the data. So we went back and we revisited a lot of these attacks. We did the initial attack that Yaniv did against Craig Ventnor's data, but we also did a simulation where we looked at about 1,000 different attributes over 20,000 records. And at the day,
would you be able to wrap up in 1 minute? I just want to make sure we have enough time for the next one.
I will jump to the end in 1 second.
Thank you
So then at the end of the day, what you basically end up with is out in this upper right-hand corner, a situation in which if you combine the right set of protections, you can get to solutions in which people are not actually attacking the data, despite the fact that things are at risk. So what I haven't talked about is the legal landscape, and that's okay. What I'll jump to at the end, since Hoon has politely given me the 30 seconds, is that what we're currently seeing is that there's a lot of changes that are on the horizon. There are new types of techniques that are being used to try to penetrate the systems, and there's new types of protection technologies. I think that there's this question about, like, even if you have crypto, you'd still have to have incentive structures for people to use it. Just having the crypto implemented and having technology available doesn't mean that people are readily going to adopt it when they already have other ways of sharing data that they're comfortable with. One of the things that we've been seeing recently is Illumina and a company that they've been working with is starting to think about synthetic data generation, which is a new direction that I haven't heard much discussion about here. And then there's a lot of questions about what's going to happen in the law. There are not that many court cases that really address the extent to which genomic data is considered to be sufficiently private. Under GDPR, it is considered to be an identifier. In the United States, it is not considered to be an identifier. And so I will pause there, or I will end there, and I'll say there's a lot of people who've been working on this work with us, and I'll give them a shout out and thank Hoon for letting me stay on stage.
Thank you so much.